everybody. Welcome to One Book, One Read, conversation on gender, race, and contemporary art, presented by Atlanta Fulton Public Library Foundation and the Auburn Avenue Research Library. How is everyone?
Oh, wonderful.
Wonderful. Hello, all. Hello.
Beautiful day.
Charmaine.
Hello.
So just to give a brief introduction of everyone that we have here today, we have Dr. Stephane Dunn, who is an author, playwright, filmmaker, and Morehouse College's professor of English and cinema, television, and emerging media studies, academic program director. That is a mouthful, Dr. Stephane. But welcome. We're glad to have you here. We also have Tracy Morrell. She's an Atlanta-based visual artist and curator. And then we also have Charmaine Minniefield. She's an activist, an artist, producer, creative consultant, and founder of the New Freedom Project. So welcome to you guys. And also, my name is Melissa Alexander. I am a photographer and filmmaker based right here in Atlanta, Georgia, in the West End community. So let's get into it. All right. How y'all feeling today? How's your day going so far?
Wonderful.
Blessed. It's
Wonderful.
a pretty
Blessed and awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
And this is such a lovely part of it. I don't get a chance necessarily to have this kind of
company.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, right. I know it's wonderful to be it's wonderful to be an artist, but it's also wonderful to be a woman in art, but then also to surround yourself with women who are doing amazing things and important things, right? Mm-hmm. So shout out to us.
Yes.
Can you guys tell me a little bit about your background and, you know, what are some of the things that inform your art?
Who's gonna go first? Tracy, I want to hear yours. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to nominate.
I'm all for that, for her to go first.
I will go first. I am not a formally trained artist. I kind of fell into it when I was in between, what am I going to do with my life? And I just picked up a paintbrush and bought paint and started to create one painting for my house and end up taking 2 years because I had to take art classes to get what was in my head onto the canvas. And it was such a peaceful process for me that I continued to paint. And then I was very fortunate to meet a mentor, Michael David, and I joined his group, Fine Arts Workshop. And that was kind of like my MFA program, informal program. I was with like 23 other artists and we met and had critiques. So I learned the things I would have learned if I was in if I'd gotten a formal art degree. And it was amazing. I mean, we had major exhibitions and I was able to hone in on what it is about being an artist that what do I want to say and what do I want to present? And it's from there, I do it every day.
Yes, yeah. So I've always been an artist. I was a little girl who drew every time we all were gathered. I would sit and draw family members, and my family fed that interest always, and that led to my teachers. And I always knew I would be an artist. I never entertained anything else, and I never doubted that I would somehow figure out how to sustain. And there were examples of entrepreneurship around me that I applied, and throughout my education, I also became very political. I was bused in my school. I was from one side of town, minority to majority, the other side of town, and that sacrifice in need for sacrifice instilled in me sort of a sense of political concern, and that led to leadership roles among my peers and all the way through college. And so by the time I ended up with the National Black Arts Festival as an arts administrator, under the banner of art activism, it all sort of made sense. And I was surrounded by legends, Harry Belafonte, Cicely Tyson, Dr. Maya Angelou, just everybody was around, I was these examples were the shoulders that I knew that I was standing on, in the sense of influence. And I started to make my own brand under the banner of Next Generation. So all of my colleagues and peers today who are creating, a lot of us in Atlanta, we were a part of a movement back then. And it really created a whole renaissance in the city. And many of us have gone on to have leadership roles still today, or some major impact in their different disciplines. And I'm really proud to say I'm a part of that movement. And today I finally put down administrator hat many years ago and picked up just my own studio practice. And that's what it started to look like: art activism in communities, working collaboratively with artists and enabling the arts, not just my own portfolio of work, but everybody, whoever, anyone in my ecosystem. And that became my brand, and also the way that I create, which led to me honing in on all kinds of historical interests, political interests, and then even spiritual practices that included ancestral veneration. And I started holding up these principles within that model of collaboration. I ended up, that led me to the ring shout as a model of how I exist in community, collaboratively with my work. And I'm standing in front of a freedom quilt that I painted vicariously while in the Gambia, but I designed it, and it was placed in the community by a sponsor, but painted by a group of Black women, and that, along with other public art, is this idea that I continue to hold up around freedom. And so I'm grateful to be in this moment in time as a fine artist, finally, and finding my own right in it, and placing and insisting that activism also has a place in fine art spaces as well. And I push the idea of access and equity and justice, even in fine art fields. So that's just me, So, and Tracy's iconic paintings behind her. Like, oh my God. I wasn't formally trained as a fine artist. I went to college and got a bachelor's of art from Agnes Scott. But I came up as an arts administrator and curator and producer. And only just now finally started to paint my own, maybe in the last 10 years. And it's come to this, so I'm grateful.
You're doing amazing work too.
Yeah, truly. What about you,
Well, such impressive company. So I would have to say that absolutely, beyond the shadow of a doubt, that books and performance art very early completely put me on the path. So I can remember being in love with writing, with acting, with TV really, really early, and being very fascinated just by the way that people are compelled into storytelling. So even though I wouldn't have said I'm going to be a storyteller, I knew I was going to be writing, and that's just before I realized, oh wow, maybe you might make a living at it somehow, or get a little paycheck for it. I mean, because I was always writing by 8, 9 years old. I was always writing skits, and my teachers, Mrs. Beard, Mrs. Dorothy Thompson, in the 5th and 6th grade would make the class perform my skits and things like that. And so and then another, even a high school teacher really helped to feed the books, to me. I was that little Black girl in children's theater. Of course, funny story now, there's this lone picture of me about 9 years old in this children's theater in the newspaper, in the local newspaper. And I'm playing the Queen, right? And you guessed it, right? Snow White, right? And the 7 Dwarfs. Of course, now I say to myself, because I'm the only little Black girl in this thing, and I'm like, I'm in the black cape in the pit, right? And I'm going, okay, let me deconstruct this. Like, why did I get that Wicked Queen wrong? But anyways,
Right?
You're on the
Ask
money.
those questions, political, early. That's right.
It's like, so very early on, had this whole thing of being an actress and of writing, but writing was always in writing. So my core was always the writing, acting, always was a TV and film junkie. Like I'm one of those people who can still remember going to see blank, right? I can still remember seeing Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry, which is a book I loved, and how, like, right, just right, and things like that. So I think that was the DNA, is to be surrounded by books. But I would also say that, like, you grow up surrounded by storytellers whom the world doesn't call storytellers, but they are. That's why my grandmother's accent, my late grandmother, on my mother's side, is always sort of in my ear. Like, it comes out in my writing when I'm writing characters or creating characters for film. I find that there's always a little bit of that comes out. It's from those late night conversations when I'm finding out about when she was, 12 or 13, and, her grandfather got ran off the farm and he was trying to fight these stories all made me want to be a storyteller. And I think very visually. So I think filmmaking came also as a result of not only loving it as a consumer, being a cinephile, right? But also because the storytelling from a visual perspective was always very powerful to me. And even when I write novel, but like, my current novel that comes out in August 2022, it's very visual to me. It's always very visual. So I'm always seeing it in TV form as well as film form and all of that. So I think that as a little girl, the things that you kind of get surrounded by shapes you in ways that, you don't see till later on, many years later. I did not know I was going to be a professor. That was nothing I ever was like, I'm going to be a professor, and I didn't know I was going to be able to meld the worlds. And I think that's what's really cool to me in this moment, is to be able to live so many of your interests and to realize so many of your, I think, passions, and they not be constantly at war, and that's like really a tiny miracle to me, I will say.
I love what each of you shared with us, right? What's jogging for me is thinking, as a photographer, I'm often looking at people, looking at their faces, looking at their smiles. And when people give really big smiles, I often think to myself, oh, wow, this is what they look like when they were 4, right? This is what they look like when they were children, right? And it's just so beautiful to see, because there's an innocence there, and there's all of that good stuff, right? But in thinking about you guys as children, right? And the dreams that you had for yourselves, and, Stephanie, as you were just telling us, and like falling in love with film, and Charmaine, this has been in you since day one, right? When you're creating, right? And maybe this is me thinking about how I am when I create, but how much like a child do you feel when you create, right?
Truthfully,
when you're in that space and you're feeling it, like for me, sometimes I feel childlike, because I have all of this wonder and this excitement, and I'm like, oh snap, I'm putting 2 and 2 together. I'm playing, I'm exploring. So I wonder if that's something that other creatives feel when they're in that space. Do you feel like a child again?
Yes. Yes. I mean,
tell me more.
Yes. It's funny because there's nothing like trying to create something, like you have an ideal, right? Or you've been inspired. And writers, for example, we get inspired. Sometimes it's an image. For me, it's social issues. Like, I just realized how much this anti-violence activism runs in my work. It's in several plays of mine. It's in the new novel. It's in the screenplay that is option that we're developing right now. There's this thread about contemporary violence and its psychological impact, but it's not just to record it. It's very much but why are we living with it sort of question. And so I think there's nothing more satisfactory than when you have this ideal, something's moving, right? And you know you got to express it. You don't know what kind of multimedia form, and so sometimes I don't know if it's going to be an essay. Sometimes it's a poem, because I write in different genres. Some of them I'm like, that's got to be a short film. I got to make a short film about that. But there's nothing like getting to it. When you get in it, and you feel like you really get in the door, because sometimes it's work sometimes getting in the door and to get started. But when you get in the door and you start to see it come to fruition, and you start to feeling it, and you thinking about it at 3 a.m. in the morning, and you writing notes while you sit in church because I'm preaching, and you like, it's like you are in this child's discovery. And man, when you feel like now you got it to where you would like let somebody see it, because you're like, I done felt this and I done expelled it. Man, you sort of are like the child in the candy store all over again that moment. It's just the coolest thing ever.
You describe it so well. Yes, that discovery space. So, I know all of us have this work we have to do in order to get there, though. Right? It's like we have to peel back circumstances, sometimes sit still enough, position ourselves in places to have that freedom to be inside of a space of discovery. I had a chance to just totally be a little girl again while I was in the Gambia. I was stranded in the Gambia because of quarantine, and I ended up there for 14 months with my 6-year-old. And I decided to allow her to be the lead in life, period. Whatever joy she wanted to experience, I just followed. I executed and stayed in that zone. And I think having had that experience intimately with her, it led to me making sure she's always been a part of my studio practice. Like, oh no, that's her desk. That's her studio over there. That's her wall, And I have a second born who's also an artist who did this mural, who also shares with me. And having been like in residence, if you will, with her as my guide, Fumi Free is what we branded, hashtag, left such an indelible impression on me. And I recognize that I have been working towards that state all this time. And that process that you describe is, yes, it is a part of every creative inspiration. But for me, it takes time to get there, and it takes time to stay there. And the result is always just overwhelming, over the top, enriching and expansive of my work and practice. So now that has made such an impression on me that I've come back, and I now have this new studio. And I know that my collaborators are my children. They're my children. So, and it's not just like being inspired by their example of discovery and curiosity. But literally, like this morning, I was riding skates. I was in skates with Carmen, scooting down. All of that. And Angela Davis Johnson is a dope artist. We know Angela's work. The other day, she's in town for the first time since the pandemic. She said, we have to stay playful. We have to continue to stay in a state of joy, like real, actual, internal, sincere joy and playfulness. And then that lets you know, like, wow, in some indigenous traditions, our children are our ancestors' return, right? To take care of us in the physical. But what lesson are they teaching us? So I'm just, everything about my art and craft, I feel like comes from that inner little girl. Mm-hmm. And even when I think about like safety and security and even the worries of the world, I think of the safety of my grandmother's lap, like that full encompassing comfort, as a principle by which to aspire in society. Like, let's create grandma's lap in the world. But from that place of just innocence, and longing, and appreciation, I think that's what I would say about being a little girl. of being a child, you know, in my creative practices. Yeah.
I know for me, my studio is my happy place, and I aim to get here every single day. It has everything that I need, and it doesn't matter if I've gone through, you know, the hell of traffic to get here. The moment I step through the door, all of a sudden, it's like my body exhaled, like,
rest.
What are we going to work on now? Okay, what do we have to work on so that we can work on what we want to work on? And okay, we're going to work an hour on this, we're going to do this, and I'm going through the process of changing into my studio clothes, and then everything is laid out. And now I get to the obligations a little bit later because I saw this, or I read this, or I have this idea that I want to explore first. But for me, it's the space that I'm in and knowing that I can do whatever I want and I get to play. And when people come here, they're like going, oh, wow, your studio, you have so, you know, they're looking at it through so many different eyes. And I was like, I'm just playing. And I'm just, you know, I get to play in wax. I get to play in paint. I get to use a blowtorch sometimes. And I'm getting
Can I come over and play?
Right.
Can I come over there and play? I'm just delighting in what you just, I'm delighting and just rejoicing to imagine y'all in y'all spaces, because I'm thinking about, you know, from Alice Walker's In Search of Our Mother's Gardens to as a woman, I think so much about my mother and my grandmothers and about what was their art and the limitations for them in terms of you know what I mean, to really immerse in it. And my dream, and for me, I don't have, you know, I think one of the things that still, it hasn't been realized fully. Like, I don't know what a ideal place would look like for me to say, like, to write in. Like, being on set is a space I love. Like, that's like, I love being on set when we're filmmaking. There's somebody like you forget it's hours later. And like, sometimes, you know, you're on this 8 a.m. and then you come out to midnight and changing. It's all kinds of stuff, but there's something so delicious about being on set. I didn't know I would adore it as much as I actually really do. It just gets me excited, like, you know, thinking about it. But the one thing I've always lacked, I guess you say, and I use the word lacked because I think I am curious about what it would be like to have a writer space that I can unfold in, because, you know, my current novel, I started it, 2012, and I wrote with one arm because I was breastfeeding my son in the other arm for the first, I'm like sitting on the couch in the living room, there's noise. I mean, I've like really written everything that I've written the last even decade. You know what I mean? It's never been in a space. At Morehouse, I can't do any work there. I can't do any work.
I'm hearing, let me tell y'all, I am quick to write somebody's grant, okay? And request some funding to do an artist retreat, okay?
Truly, when you think about it, when you think about like that space, getting that space, right? I think about A Room of One's Own by Virginia Woolf, right? How important it is for us to, as women, and I mean, you know, just in general for anyone really, but for as women, because we do take on so many different roles as taking care of everyone. And then you have students. I mean, there's all of these things, right? And then taking that space for yourself, you know, me having a studio right now, not having to do my photography or my film work in my home anymore has already freed up so much, because that becomes my place. That becomes my play space. That becomes my space away from the sanctuary of home. And it also allows me to separate the two, to be able to say, okay, when I come in here, I'm coming to work, I'm also coming to play, right? So thinking about this staying in this state of play, right? What are some of the other integral things that go into being an artist, though? Because it's not all play. It's not always going to be fun and all of those, you know, all of those joyful feelings. What are also some of the things that an artist, that you guys feel that an artist should also possess within themselves to really be able to bring about, and I was going to say success, but success is subjective, right? Just creating a piece, like Tracy, when you had that idea of that artwork for your home, right? It took you 2 years to get it out, right? Those 2 years probably weren't all joyful, right? In every single time, every single moment. So what are some of those things that you think that artists should also possess within themselves, other than just that feeling of joy and that playfulness?
And I'll start with that one, because I consult with artists, especially younger artists, because I want them to understand the administrative part of having a practice and what that entails. Like, how are you inventorying your work? How is it being photographed? Are you submitting to exhibitions or submitting to residencies? And I take them through a whole process. And some of them, they're like, I didn't learn this in art school. And I said, so now you're getting that type of education, because there are certain things that you have to do in order for you to be prepared for the opportunity that comes your way. Because when the opportunity comes, you need to be prepared. When someone says, hey, we got this film here and we're considering having your work, do you have high-res images of these pieces we see on your website? I sure do. Let me send that to you with all the information on it. And and this is what it would cost you, and all of that. I think one of the most important things that, and I learned this from Louis Delsart, when he allowed me to work on the MLK panel, and he gave me panel number 25, and I was in his studio, and for the first time, while I was in there working, other artists came in, local, international, and I was like, wow, this is so cool, because the energy was always up and you're meeting people. From that point forward, I made sure that I was in a space where I was surrounded by other artists, because that's how I learned. That's how I learned about opportunities. I learned about new ideas, new, when something goes wrong, I go down to Charlie Palmer and go like, so this happened. Has this ever happened to you? Oh yeah, this is all you have to do to get this done. Thank you. Okay, let me get that going. And so when I talk to younger artists, I say, make sure you get your tribe together, because creating in isolation sometimes makes it a little bit harder. But if you have other artists that are within your network, that they don't cause you any stress. When y'all are around each other, y'all are able to share ideas. I said, that becomes your tribe, and that sustains you in those moments when you're like, why am I an artist again? I'm questioning that. So, there's administrative parts, there is creating your tribe. I mean, those things I think are very integral to being an artist who is able to, when they get into their space, create work, and it comes out of them. What about y'all?
I would add to that. Allow yourself to have your own distinct narrative, your own voice. Don't try to be like anyone else. You will go your whole career in the shadow until you finally find your own narrative, your own story that you're telling. And that includes in medium and in content. Then you're backpedaling. You're standing in you're not moving forward. So you're not going to find success. And the world, that's what the world wants. As soon as you discover it, then everything changes. It all unfolds, and all things align. It all, you can do it like this, you can do it like that. All the network starts to unfold. And then I would also say that we need funding. Like, I think it's important just to acknowledge that we need support and funding. And artists can't necessarily bring that themselves, but they do need to acknowledge and know that that's necessary. So how do you approach your creative practice with a sense of sustainability and economics in mind, right? So you have to have levels in which you create and audiences can access you. But also think of yourself as the institution. You are the Woodruff. You are the National Black Arts Festival for your family, for your community, for your tribe. You are. And guess what? They'll pull out a check, just like a patron at the Woodruff that gets a big, huge gala at the end of the year. Your barbecue is just fine in the springtime. Yes, they will. And they'll collect your work over and over. And they'll receive your text when it's time to buy canvases because they're on sale. They will respond to you. Create your own network based on your understanding that you are the institution. You're the arts in your community. So allow your community to support the arts.
I love the idea of that barbecue because I might have to use that.
I'm saying it could be a whole like that. You know.
I love that. I love that because that's definitely the space that we gather. Stephanie, what about you though?
I mean, I first of all, I want to say, Ashe, I'm looking at Louis Delsart's sketch of me.
Louis Delsart, his photograph
right on the wall here. Right on the wall there. Yes. Keep it right by the bedroom there and everything. And so, but I mean, I must echo the business part of it. I literally just had this discussion with my filmmaker students, seniors about to roll out, and they're in the middle of making their short films. And they're taking a class called Hollywood Politics and Power with me. And it's centrally focused on the business. So we've had everybody from CEOs of studios to producers to entertainment lawyers, discussing everything from copyrights to, how you need to represent your content. They're doing things like they have to prepare a deck to represent their short film, because if you're trying to give that ideal of your short film or of your script, right, and they want a visual, then you have to be, ready to send something, because that's what people want. They want the quick thing they can look through and go, okay, this is arresting my attention or not. So we're making sure they understand the presentation part, quote, after the work is done, or if you have an ideal for the work, and then how you make that visual for folks who won't get it unless unless you do that. It is so important. And I certainly didn't know that at the beginning. And this happens for every piece of content that you produce. Yeah. A book, a film, a piece of art. You really do have to, in some ways, be able to sell it, represent it, and start pitching, both, in a visual representation that's not the actual work, because you're not toting the actual work everywhere, or not everybody wants to read the screenplay at first. It's like 120 pages. It's like, sell me on the ideal. So I can't even say how much I think you can't rely just on other people to do that. Even if you're not going to do all that heavy labor every time, you have to understand the process that is around your business. So you can make sure folks even working for you are taking care of business on your behalf. Just like you got to look at the bank account when you get an accountant, right? You can't sign no blank check. So I think that is so important. But the other thing I would say that I think you asked that question of what else it takes. I mean, I just know this, if I don't know anything else, it takes the practice of discipline and patience. Oh my God, yeah. These are things, they sound all, sort of like intangibles, but I'm telling you, it's almost like because almost everything we do in terms of whatever our art form, we don't write a book overnight. Usually whatever we're working on as a painter or sculptor, it's just simply not done overnight. It requires, nobody's applauding you yet. It's just great, and you are sitting there maybe for years sustaining, and what makes one continue to work on something for years without knowing, is this going to end up at some museum? Is it going to be published? Is this going to be right? It's not like this short-term sort of payoff. It's like you've got to be in it for the long haul, and you've got to be willing to have the stamina to work on something that you don't quite know where it's going yet, but every week you keep working on it. The last thing I'll say really quickly is that even the way you practice your art you kind of have to find your way of practice in that way. It's like once you learn all the knowledge of how writers, like we understand that writers use similes and metaphors, and artists, there's different artists that use different sort of, right, schools of thought on how to use color and etc. But at the end of the day, you got to be the one who's going, Walter Mosley might get up and he's like, at 4 a.m., from 4 a.m. to blanky blanky, I write. But I'm pretty sure he never had to breastfeed a child. I'm sorry. And have to do it for like 2 years. And so that doesn't work. Okay. And so I think it's also about being generous enough to go that it's the long haul, it's the long term. And even if that means that you do it on the weekends because I work 12 hours and whatever the case might be, there's no right script except that you do it and that you keep doing it and that you keep. So you got to have that, whatever that is, you got to have that.
I love that. I love that because I'm thinking like, okay, we talked about the network, right? We talked about the institutions. We talked about the long haul, the work, everything that goes into that. What I'm hearing from all of you is how strong your voices are, right? You all are very clear about what it is that you're bringing to the table. I mean, it took time. It took a little bit of marinating. It took some lessons and all of these things, right? And people say you can take an L, but to me, it's never a loss. It's always a learning experience, right? It's always a learning experience. How important, and like I said, your voices are so strong about this. How important is it to have a voice as an artist? But then also, what is it like when you don't have a voice or your voice is not heard? So that question is kind of twofold.
Can I answer real quickly? Because mine is going to be short. I would say that your confidence is bothered. And it takes a level of kind of, and when I say confidence, it's more like sort of faith-inspired type of confidence, like, you know what I mean? To go for it. And I think if you are not, if you don't have that, I know so many people who don't create because they're afraid, is what I'm saying. Like they're really afraid. Like they got the ideal, they've even got the desire, but they're really afraid, you know what I mean? To jump into that page or on the canvas and see what happens. And some of that is because they haven't figured it out, like who they're going to be on that canvas or on that page yet. And don't know, Do
you think that they're afraid of what others will think, or do you think they're afraid to see themselves?
Both. But I think it's also fear of like when you don't quite know yet what you're going to know. See, when you don't know that it's going to be okay, that you are going to find your way, because practice helps you find your way.
Yes.
And you don't quite know that yet until you start to practice.
You don't know that right out the gate, but once I know for myself, I tend to find that sometimes I have dreams that are so large. I'm like, come on now, that's going to take a lot, or how are you going to get that done? But if the idea doesn't leave me and it gives me that feeling where I get like jumpy and excited every time I think about it, I'm like, all right, this is a large undertaking, but I can't let it go. It's just surging through me. And I want to tell people about it. I'm like, you know what? F it. We're about to see what happens and what I can do. Cause
that's the voice, girl, the F it. I'm about to do this. That's when you get that, when you get that feeling.
So I mean, even further now, now that we established, what this idea of a voice is, right? Tracy and Charmaine, thinking about these voices, what is that like? What does that voice tell you? And have you ever not had it? Have you ever like had that feeling of not having a voice?
I think for me, no, Tracy.
No, go.
Well, I was just gonna say, that question leads me to activism. And you know, my work pushes back against erasure and erasure in communities, because we can see the evolution of a community and this shift in narrative of a community that has been driven so much by capitalism in this country that it doesn't always preserve the identity of the legacy within that community to make it a space that feels safe for, you know, those who've lived there before or those who desire to be there who are similar. It creates this sort of rub against the past and that creates the erasure. And so for me, my work is about social iconography and shifting that and pushing back against that and creating monuments that look and feel or speak from the aesthetic of the community as it existed before or as it exists now, as it's changing, you know. And so mine has to do with erasure and not being heard in community. And then how that plays out in terms of enabling narratives. My work preserves Black narratives in those spaces. But as an artist, a lot of times art is left off of the table or left out of the conversation when it comes to how a community is developed or evolves. The arts are the last part they put on the decorative part versus the actual formative part. Yeah, the formative part. And you know, and then also often getting the scraps of the matter, we get the scraps of the funding, you know, especially in the South, you know, I won't say regional, but there are other cities that position art more centrally to the economy of a city, or the development of a city, or you know, that doesn't necessarily hasn't historically happened in Atlanta. And we all in everybody's separate spaces have worked to change that, you know, and to make better by artists in that way. And so for me, I just want to see more artists enabled. I want to acknowledge that, you know, where art is, that art in Atlanta is just not the entertainment industry. People don't even recognize that the film industry is art. That's just a discipline. You know, one of the many disciplines: dance, music, film. So, you know, the film industry is getting all the play and all the tax incentives and all the, you know, all that. Where's dance? Where's music in that? You know, well, music gets entertainment industry attention, but really, I think that we have to start to think differently about where arts sit inside of society, so that artists who are telling narratives already are inside of their own creative practice that has to do with equity and justice in general. And I feel like artists are the ones who can lead that in the future. So
can I say
that's my
something?
art. I go to activism.
Oh, sorry. I wanted to say something really quick about what you said, because it was really so important. And that's one of the things that attracted me to Atlanta, by the way, because I felt like you get all your lives in terms of your theater, and you'd see Black people doing this stuff, people of color doing this stuff. But I just wanted to interject really quickly. The entertainment industry, though, is not Georgia is not a place where independent Black filmmakers like myself and Black women independent filmmakers are supported. That is not true. It's a place where commercial film production is happening. Like the Marvel is coming, but they're not. You understand what I'm saying? Which is a totally different thing. It is terribly difficult to be trying to tell the stories about Black.
I feel like we're doing a disservice to make such a gulf and divide between the commercial and for-profit and the nonprofit fine arts, you know, side. I think we're doing a disservice. Where we could be enabling, like we should be getting, you know, race car sponsors all over our jackets. You know, we're on a wall in a community. You know, we're working up towards that. During the pandemic, did y'all see that shift though? Like they all knew we were the ones to make it all better. The art,
Yes.
the artist the way,
Yes,
And I'm
I
grateful.
pitched the show about y'all. I pitched the show about Black visual artists too. I'm not gonna say the network. We still, and then it was gonna highlight the visual artists. I was like, who really are the voices and the faces to me of this leg of social movement.
Yeah.
I know with me, I create with the intention of showing the beauty of the Black female form and make sure that the paintings that I create are the counter narrative that's what put out there commercially. So, because I have strong women in my family, I was raised with strong women and men as well. But what I was seeing, and when I first moved to Atlanta, I was in the music industry. And when I was in the music industry doing street promotions, I was in the strip clubs, getting the DJs, giving them music and stuff like that. And what I saw there, that's an education. But the conversations that I had was the conversations with, okay, these women are being glorified, but they're being glorified without their humanity, And so I definitely wanted to make sure, once I realized that my true purpose is visual art, was that I will make sure that all my paintings I want them to inspire young people, particularly young people of color. The glossiness of it, I want who's ever looking at it be able to see themselves within this image of a Black female, and they're all based on real people. And she's painted blue, but she's a Black female. So it's very, we fight the battle of how we are viewed in our own ways. I love when I see what Charmaine is doing. I'm just like going, girl, go ahead. Yeah, so just go right ahead. That whole building there is like an education, like, yes, you may not know this person, but now you do, okay? And with the filmmaking and the independent filmmaking, the documentaries and stuff like that, we need that. We need that so that our stories are out there. And we need more of it.
I wanted to give a quick example of something based on what you said. So I hope you guys have seen it. If you don't, do watch it. But the short film that's nominated for an Oscar is called The Queen of Basketball. And it's about Louisa, who was the first Black woman. Extraordinary story of her. It's a short doc. And you can see it for free, I think, on Showtime, on the New York Times. If you put in Queen of Basketball, New York Times, I think it's New York Times, or Showtime, it'll let you see it for free. But it's nominated for an Oscar, right? Now, it's about this Southern sister who goes on to be even drafted by the NBA. And I'm not going to do a spoiler, but trust me, you better email me when you see it. But here's the thing about that. That story is made by, basically directed by a young white male filmmaker, and it's backed by Steph Curry and Shaquille O'Neal. Now, why do I bring that up? It's great having a story out, but it's the type of story that would be hard as hell for an independent Black woman filmmaker, and even people like Julie Dash, whom we've discussed.
Yeah.
She and I have discussed this endlessly. The stories about Black women that she's pitched, even after being, a Sundance, history-making filmmaker with Daughters of the Dust. It is unbelievable what we go through still, right? To be the ones, though, even whatever towns we have, it doesn't matter, experience, to make the stories even about us, right? It's like a bit greenlit by somebody like, right, white and male, or it's got to be backed by like, right, some, known Black male, or you can't get in the door or the money a lot of times, or just, it's really difficult, or the funding.
Ladies, this has been a wonderful conversation.
I don't want it to stop. Don't stop.
I don't want it to stop either, but we are about to wind down, right? Because what I really wanted to know, maybe we'll have a part 2. What I wanted to know is, I didn't dive as much into understanding your relationships with women, as well as your relationship with your mothers, your relationship with, if you have sisters, your female friends. I want to understand how all of that informs your artwork, right? We don't have time for that today. We're going to come back to that. We'll talk to Auburn Ave about that and see if we can come back to that. But just in these last few moments, is there anything else that you want to share with us about your practice, about yourselves? I'll give you guys the floor.
Put someone else on. The function of freedom is to free another.
No, that's so beautiful.
Toni Morrison.
Yep.
Toni Morrison, shout out. Nice name drop.
Right.
The best name drop.
Ancestor.
The biggest thing that I think that is out there, being in Atlanta is really a great place to create the work. I know for visual artists, we have studios, we have a plethora of artists that are out there, but getting outside of Atlanta sometimes takes challenge, and for our work to have those wider audiences, we have to continue to strive to make sure that it moves outside of, because Atlanta is a comfort zone. It can,
Yes, Tracy.
Wherever you go, you can see art in all its different forms, but I'm always telling the little ones when I'm talking to them, I said, when you see my artwork on 20 feet tall in a building in another country, okay, then she's gonna be really happy. She's gonna be really happy, okay? That's what we're aiming for. And they're like, wow, really, that could happen? Yes, it can and it will.
Yeah, I think I would just say quickly that the one thing that I think is really powerful about women that we see doing the thing right now, whether we look at Issa Rae or we look at, at others who are doing the thing, if we arrive at a certain place where we have a certain level of where our quote success has brought us to a certain level, then it's really important to build the collectives. To somehow, it's not just about because you're there at the point of success, that's enough to okay, you also have to actively be going, now what can we do if you're a visual artist, that I'm going to be creating something that brings other, Black female creatives up, right? It brings us together so that we're more of this force, right? If I create this company, am I repping, it's like Regina King's moment, right? She gonna make film and she gonna employ blah, blah, blah women and she gonna do it in collaborative fashion with other women. It's like that moment is what we got to have in all of our, I think, art forms.
I agree.
Absolutely.
Yes, ma'am.
Absolutely.
Well, Tracy.
Okay, collaboration, everybody. You'll be getting an email.
Yes.
A text.
I'm here for it. So Tracy, Stephanie, Charmaine, thank you guys, or thank you ladies, for joining us for a wonderful, wonderful conversation. So remember everyone, this is One Book, One Read, conversation on gender, race, and contemporary art, presented by Atlanta Fulton Public Library Foundation and the Auburn Avenue Research Library. You ladies have a wonderful day, and we'll go ahead and head out here.
Thank you, Melissa.
Guys.
Part 2 coming.